In 1966, an Australian ship captain passed by a small deserted island called Ida in his small boat. But while looking at the island through binoculars, he noticed smoke coming out of the forest trees. He wondered how smoke could come out of a deserted island. While he was looking through binoculars, suddenly a person appeared from among the trees. This person was wearing only shorts and had long hair, and it was clear that he was from a local tribe. The stranger, as soon as he saw the boat, started screaming and immediately threw himself into the sea and started swimming towards the boat. Here the captain began to feel afraid, so he grabbed the gun that was in the boat and began to prepare to confront the stranger. The person reached the boat, and it turned out to the captain that he was actually a teenage boy. This boy said to him, "My name is Stephen, and there are 5 other boys on the island. We lost our way and were stuck here for 15 months. Today's video talks about an amazing survival story. The goal of the 6 boys was to escape from school, but they ended up lost and stranded on a deserted island. How did this happen, and how did they survive in this isolated place for so long?" What we know in today's story, our story begins in 1965 in a country called the Kingdom of Tonga. This country is a group of small islands in the Pacific Ocean located in this region east of Australia. The heroes of our story are the 6 boys whose pictures are in front of you. Sione, Manu, Stian, Kolo, David, and Luca. They were students in a Catholic school, that is, a religious school. This school was a boarding school, meaning that the students did not only study there, but also lived there. They ate, drank, and slept there. Everything was in the school. This school had very strict rules and restricted the students and their freedom. They were only allowed to go out 1 day a week and under the supervision of teachers. Of course, they were monks and nuns, so they treated the students very strictly and sometimes punished them severely if they did something wrong or did not listen. The 6 heroes of our story, who were between 14 and 16 years old at the time, felt upset by the situation they were in. As they sat and chatted with each other, they always talked about a life of freedom and pleasure and dreamed of another world where they could do whatever they wanted. One day, while they were meeting during their lunch break, the eldest boy, Sione, said to his friends, "Why don't we run away?" One of them asked him where he wanted to run away to. Sione said, "Let's go to Fiji." Fiji was also an island in the same Pacific region and was considered a larger and more developed island than the Kingdom of Tonga, but it was very far away. The boys began planning their long journey. The first thing they needed was a boat, but since none of them had one, they decided to steal the boat of an old, nervous fisherman who they had had some trouble with before. He was a convenient target for them. They wouldn't feel guilty if they took his boat. The boys decided to start their journey at night so that they would have time to get away from the island before anyone found out that they had run away. About an hour after school went to bed, after they were sure that most of the students and teachers were asleep, they quietly sneaked out of their rooms, climbed over the school fence, and ran away. After that, they went to the beach, and there they found the old man's boat. They hated it and put their things in the boat, raised the anchor and lowered the sail. They carried their basic things with them. They brought some food, fruits, and even a portable gas stove to cook the fish they caught while at sea. But none of them thought to bring a compass or a map. The distance from Tonga to Fiji is more than 750 kilometers. So, the smart ones, none of them thought to bring the simplest tool that could help them keep their course. Anyway, even if they had brought a map and a compass, such a trip would still be almost impossible for young boys who had never been to the sea before. At least, the description we can give them is that they are crazy. After about 2 hours of their journey, they were already far from the coast at this point, and it was almost dawn. By this time, the boys were starting to feel tired, especially since they had not slept yet and were not used to staying up late because their school had forbidden them to do so. It was a new experience for them to stay awake for so long. Little by little, they fell asleep one by one until they were all asleep, but no one remained awake. The sail of the boat was open and the wind was playing with it and blowing it in random directions. The boys woke up, but none of them woke up until they heard the sound of thunder. They were surprised by a storm in the middle of the ocean. It suddenly attacked them. They woke up in a panic, and the first thing they tried to do was to raise the sail, because if the sail is low and there is a windstorm, it will play with them. But before they could raise the sail, its fabric began to tear. It was an old sail and was in bad shape, so the storm tore it apart and it flew away. The 6 boys stayed awake throughout the storm, trying not to fall out of the boat, holding each other's hands. Finally, after a while, the storm subsided and the weather improved, but now the group was in a tragic situation. They did not know where they were, and they could not control the direction of the boat's movement because they had no sail. They remained in this state for 8 days, the waves of the sea tossing them from place to place, and they were only trying to save themselves. Their food and fruits ran out, and fishing, which they thought would be easy, did not work for them. They couldn't catch anything, and even the drinking water they had was running out, so they started trying to collect rainwater in the coconuts they carried with them. That is, they would take the coconuts and cut them in half and carry them like cups and collect the rainwater in them. They even made a drinking schedule. Each one would drink as little as possible in drops, because if they ran out of water, it would be their end. Finally, after suffering for 8 days in this condition, on the 9th day, they saw an island on the horizon. This was the first piece of land they had seen since they left their island. Of course, they didn't have a sail to guide the boat to the island, so they kept trying to row with their hands, with any tool that could help them on the boat, and fortunately the waves helped them in the end. Finally, they approached the island in the evening, so they jumped into the sea and swam to the shore, leaving the boat in the sea alone because they had no means of pulling it with them to the shore. The anchor broke on them during the journey, so the boys swam to the island and the boat was lost in the sea, and as soon as they reached the shore, they threw themselves on the sand and fell asleep from exhaustion and did not wake up until sunrise the next day. And from here begins the journey of salvation on this island, a journey that would be much longer than the journey they had planned. The island that the 6 boys reached was called Ida Island, and it was considered a deserted island for more than 100 years, and before these 100 years some indigenous people lived on it, and their number could have reached hundreds. But suddenly slave traders attacked them and took them all and sold them as slaves, and no one remained of them, neither young nor old, neither man nor woman. They literally kidnapped all the inhabitants of the island, and since that time the island has become deserted. The 6 boys tried as soon as they woke up to search for food and water, and they were able to make wooden spears from trees, and they took wooden sticks and sharpened their ends with stones. They used these spears to catch fish. Of course, they didn't have fire, so they had to eat raw fish. They managed to get food, but they were still thirsty and couldn't find a source of drinking water, so they started to catch seagulls from their nests and drink their blood. After that, they took their eggs and drank them. For them, any food or drink, no matter how bad it was a great blessing. The most delicious food in the world.
Any food, anything to drink.
Any food, no matter how awful it is and how dirty it is, it's a very beautiful thing to have it in that time.
After the boys regained their energy a little, they started to explore the island and climb its hills. In one area, they found useful things and tools. This area belonged to the indigenous people who lived on the island 100 years ago before the slave traders took them. In this area, the boys found pottery, primitive knives, and even chickens. This means that it was a great booty for them. They never expected to find all these things. After that, they kept trying to light a fire. It took them a long time, several days, and many attempts. Because this fire was something precious, in order to preserve it, they made a schedule for themselves called the Fire Preservation Schedule. They took turns feeding the fire with wood and maintaining it, and at night they would gather around the fire in a circle and hold each other's hands and sing. These songs were religious songs they learned from their school. Haha, now they felt the benefit of school. The wisdom is that when a person is blessed, you don't really feel it until you lose it. I mean, I'm sure every day they spent on that island, they wished they had spent it in school. But the boys were not helpless. They were able to take advantage of everything around them and even used palm fronds to build a small hut for themselves and made themselves a banana and bean farm, and not only the basic needs, but they also made themselves a gym and weights, and after that they made a badminton court. One of them also made himself a primitive guitar made of wooden planks and coconut shells. Of course, things did not always go well. I mean, since they were teenagers, it is normal for disagreements and problems to occur between them. They even imposed a system which is, if two of them get into a fight, the law is that each of them takes himself and goes to one side of the island and stays away from each other. Of course, psychologically, the situation was very difficult. Every additional day they spent alone on this island made them lose more hope of returning to their families again. But despite everything, there was still a little hope. So they tried to build a wooden wall for themselves from the trees of the jungle in the hope that they would take this wall and cross the sea. But the wall could not bear them and sank in the water immediately, and perhaps it would have been better for it to sink, because if they tried to sail on it, the sea would have swallowed them up. They remained on the island and divided the tasks among themselves, some keeping the fire, some tending the animals, some looking after the farm, and some watching the sea. All these tasks kept them busy and perhaps helped them not to fall into depression. They had been on this island for 15 months, and that day Stephen, who was in charge of the watch, stood on a high plateau and watched the sea to see if there was a passing ship that could save them. Indeed, he was there that day, and for the first time he saw a small ship or boat passing the island. He quickly descended from the plateau and reached the shore and began pointing and shouting at the person in the boat. Then he went down into the sea and swam towards the boat. After he got into the boat, he found the captain pointing his gun at him. Stephen raised his hands and said in English, "My name is Stephen, and there are 5 other boys on the island who have been lost and stuck here for 15 months. The captain lowered his gun and introduced himself. The captain's name was Peter Warner, and he was an Australian fisherman. He said he saw smoke coming out of the trees in the forest through his binoculars. He was surprised and approached the island to see what was happening, because as far as he knew, this island was deserted. Now he understood the story when he met Stephen. Then the remaining 5 boys came and boarded the boat. Captain Peter took their names and called the Coast Guard, who confirmed that the boys had indeed been missing for over a year and were considered dead. Their families even held funerals for them. This was a touching and shocking moment for Peter.
And the operator very tearfully said, "It's true. These boys were students at this college. They've been given up for dead. Funerals have been held, and now you found them." That was a very emotional moment for all of us.
Of course, when the boys realized that they would finally return to their families and homes, their feelings were indescribable.
So you knew you were going home.
Yes,
How did that feel?
like walking through the door to heaven.
But heaven had to wait a little for the boys. They arrived at the nearest port and were immediately arrested. Why? Because the old fisherman they had stolen the boat from had reported them. As soon as they returned, he went and asked the police to arrest them. The children were still young, poor things, coming from suffering and isolation from the world for at least 15 months. Give them a chance to breathe and see their families. But there was no way. The old man was stubborn. Peter, the captain who saved them, decided to help them again. Peter was actually the son of a rich man in Australia, not rich, but he had strong connections with some media outlets. He called an Australian channel called Channel 7 and presented the story to them and said, "Why don't you make a documentary about it? It's an exciting and fresh story." So they took an interest in the subject and sent a crew of photographers and gave Peter a small amount of money as an advance payment. Peter took this money and paid the old man, the owner of the boat, the value of the boat he owned. The old man surrendered and the police released the children and the boys were released from prison. From that moment on, the channel crew started filming all the events. After that, Peter took the boys in the boat and went to the island where the boys' parents and families lived. They lived on another island other than the one they were on. The photographers documented the moment the boys arrived and met their parents after all this time and after they thought they were gone forever. Tears, crying, and many feelings that I feel like it's hard for one to imagine these feelings unless one has experienced them. I mean, I want you to imagine someone you love suddenly disappearing and you think they're dead and then they come back 15 months later. How would you feel? It's something I don't think anyone can imagine. You really have to experience it to feel it. So, how did the parents feel when they saw their children? Of course, the group had parties and celebrations and it was a big event. A few days later, after the boys had rested and enjoyed themselves with their parents, they returned with the TV crew to Ida Island again. There, they filmed the documentary and the footage we've seen in order to document the events that happened to the boys. Of course, they had no interest in going back to school again, so they worked with Peter on his boat for a while. They fished and then each went their own way in life with different professions, but to this day, Manu still works with Peter, and to this day they consider themselves best friends. Thank you. I hope we have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel and activate the bell button. For those who are free, these are other awesome clips. Just watch it and I will see you in the next video. Bye.